I have contemplated many different methods to describe the mechanics of observers in the scalar field. I have concluded that in order to better understand the mechanics of observers in the field, it is beneficial to reference a series of essays by Ronald Barthes. The anthology is titled The Eiffel Tower and Other Mythologies. Ronald Barthes was a French literary theorist, essayist, philosopher, and critic. In his essays, Barthes uses a system of polarities to define the Eiffel Tower. Barthes' contemplations on the tower investigate the duality the tower establishes between the spectator, the observer, and the spectacle, the observed. Barthes' contemplation of the panorama created by the tower will help us better understand how the scalar field naturally constructs the mechanics for panoramic observation. Barthes' work does not merely describe relationships created at the Eiffel Tower. The relationships established by Barthes concern the fundamental mechanics of life itself. Despite Barthes being utterly unaware of the existence and structure of the scalar field, Barthes had an incredibly prophetic understanding of observation in our universe. We exist in the field. Field cycles form the fundamental building blocks of what we consider reality. Studying Barthes' work, we will see how the mechanics of individual field cycles establish relationships we see when we observe aggregations of like particles progressing in time as it undergoes cycles in the field. This realm separates and joins particles into systems formed by aggregating particles with like properties. In this realm, successive field cycles continually progress and are stitched together by observers like us to observe the trends in the progression of matter as it undergoes cycles in the field. It seems logical that the human experience of observing the universe would be somehow akin to the mechanics of observations made by individual quantum particles. The natural world, or the realm humans exist in, is constructed entirely out of particles of matter. Like all particles or systems of matter, humans are observers that exist in the field and are bound to its progression. Humans subconsciously employ grand structuralism when observing the surrounding universe. If you have yet to read Barthes' work, I highly recommend reading the complete series of essays included in The Eiffel Tower and Other Mythologies. For those not familiar with his essay, I will explain Barthes' arguments and beliefs by sharing and analyzing a selection of passages. When describing his beliefs about the tower, Barthes begins by recanting a story. Barthes states,
Maupassant often lunched at the restaurant in the tower, though he didn't care much for the food. It's the only place in Paris, he used to say, where I don't have to see it. And it's true that you must take endless precautions, in Paris, not to see the Eiffel Tower, whatever the season, through mist and cloud, on overcast days or in sunshine, in rain, wherever you are, whatever the landscape of roofs, domes, or branches separating you from it, the tower is there, incorporated into daily life until you can no longer grant it any specific attribute. Determined merely to persist, like a rock or the river, it is as literal as a phenomenon of nature whose meaning can be questioned to infinity but whose existence is incontestable.
Barthes describes the tower's existence as an incontestable reality of Parisian life. Wherever you find yourself in the city, the tower seems to always be within a glance. The tower is so heavily integrated into daily life that its most notable attribute has become its persistent state of existence. Across the city, the tower is observed. The tower, however, is not intended only to be observed. The tower also functions as a place to conduct observations. Hopefully, you are beginning to see how the description of the Eiffel Tower by Barthes corresponds closely with the mechanics of our model. The tower represents a primary observer. While conducting observations from the tower, the entire Parisian landscape unfolds in front of you. Primary observers believe themselves to be at the center of the universe. Primary observers observe the whole field to be expanding away from their positions. Because of the expansion of the field away from the primary observer, primary observers must undergo obligatory field cycles tailored to each particle of matter contained within its observable universe. Like the tower, a primary observer is not only observing the entirety of its observable universe, it concurrently acts as the subject of observation for every particle of matter that surrounds it in its observable universe.
In order to negate the Eiffel Tower, you must, like Maupassant, get up on it and, so to speak, identify yourself with it. Like man himself, who is the only one not to know his own glance, the tower is the only blind point of the total optical system of which it is the center in Paris, the circumference.
We previously made the conjecture that a primary observer cannot directly observe its own internal state. Because of this, a primary observer must determine its state of existence by examining its observed relationships with other bodies of matter whose states are known. It is not just man who is the only one not to know his own glance. All primary observers are blind to themselves. Primary observers themselves occupy the only blind point in their complete optical systems. Like the centralized Eiffel Tower surrounded by the city, the primary observer observes itself located in the center of the scalar field.
Like Monsieur Jourdain confronted with prose, every visitor to the tower makes structuralism without knowing it. In Paris spread out beneath him, he spontaneously distinguishes separate because known points and yet does not stop linking them, perceiving them within a great functional space. In short, he separates in groups. Paris offers itself to him as an object virtually prepared, exposed to the intelligence, but which he must himself construct by a final activity of the mind, nothing less passive than the overall view the tower gives to Paris. This activity of the mind, conveyed by the tourist's modest glance, has an aim: decipherment.
We will see that, like observing from the tower, the properties of the scalar field enable primary observers to engage in sophisticated structuralism. Primary observers separate and link. From their perch in the center of the scalar field, primary observers are given a platform to observe their surroundings within a great functional space. For particles of matter, observing in the scalar field is akin to observing Paris from the top of the tower. How can the mechanics of matter in the scalar field enable observers to conduct sophisticated structuralism without even knowing it? While progressing through cycles with all other particles of matter in its observable universe, artifacts of the field's mechanics allow a primary observer to conduct mindless structuralism. Factors including the composition of matter, the distance of matter from the primary observer, and the quantity of matter, all intrinsically generate aggregations of like particles known as systems. Because the mechanics of the scalar field are dependent on distance, systems of matter progress with a succession of similar field cycles whose properties are dependent on the system's location related to the primary observer. We are all bodies of matter that exist in the uniformly expanding scalar field. The unique mechanics of the field puts each observer at the center of their known universe. At the center of the universe, the mechanics of the field construct a place for panoramic observation. From this vantage point, the observer has the possibility of observing every particle of matter in the observer's known universe. Not only is it possible, but the mechanics of the scalar field force the observer to continually undergo processes with every particle of matter in its observable universe. The observer must undergo processes as it fights to conserve its known reality. So what does it mean to observe in a panorama? For that, we will refer to the wisdom of Barthes.
What, in fact, is a panorama? An image we attempt to decipher, in which we try to recognize known sights, to identify landmarks. Take some view of Paris taken from the Eiffel Tower. Here you make out the hill sloping down from Châtelet, there the Bois de Boulogne, but where is the Arc de Triomphe? You don't see it, and this absence compels you to inspect the panorama once again, to look for this point which is missing in your structure. Your knowledge, the knowledge you may have of Parisian topography, struggles with your perception, and in a sense, that is what intelligence is: to reconstitute, to make memory and sensation cooperate so as to produce in your mind a simulacrum of Paris, of which the elements are in front of you, real.
Matter in the scalar field conducts panoramic observations. Like the visitor at the tower who recognizes Parisian landmarks, matter has knowledge of all the bodies within its known universe. Like the struggling visitor at the tower, the field elicits a struggle in matter as it attempts to conserve its perception of reality. Using what is possibly a form of intelligence, matter undergoes processes or cycles in the field that reconstruct the reality it initially observed. By reconstructing reality, Matter reconstitutes its knowledge of its surrounding universe. Comparable to the experience of visiting the tower, each of us exists at the center of our known universe. The notion may seem exceptionally anthropocentric, however, it is not limited to conscious observers. Every particle of matter believes itself to be at the center of the universe. From our towering vantage, at the center of the scalar field, we employ great structuralism. This assessment enables us to conduct more meaningful observations of the surrounding universe,